Welcome to Tomversations, a monthly conversation with me, your host, Tom Hollingsworth, on a variety of enterprise IT topics. This month, I'd like to jump back into security. Anyone who's tried to get into the InfoSec world probably knows that it's completely filled with acronyms. More than maybe any other discipline in IT, there are so many letters that are floating around out there that sound somewhat similar to each other, could have massive impacts on the trajectory that your career takes. And I'd like to break down three of them today because there are three things that I think encapsulate the way that we look for threats and how we respond to them. And as you could probably guess by the title of this episode, we're going to be talking about SIEMs, SOARs, and XDR. So before we jump into the comparisons and everything, first we kind of have to figure out what we're talking about here. So let's start with the granddaddy of them all, the SIEM, which stands for Security Incident and Event Manager. What is it? Well, it is a tool that is designed to aggregate data. Think about all of the sources of data that you have in your environment that could provide critical information for security incidents. Maybe it's log management. Maybe it is access control. Anything that leaves a footprint, anything that leaves data behind. Historically, it's been very difficult to collect all of that data. You have to log into the particular application or system that contains it. Silos are very common in security. And the original purpose of a SIEM was to break down some of those silos by creating one centralized location to accept all of that data. What does it do once it gets there? Well, most SIEMs, the platform has some kind of intelligence that can be applied to the data, because data in and of itself is pretty much useless until it's been refined. Then it becomes information. So through a combination of things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, advanced linear regression, and just throwing darts at a dartboard, the SIEM's job is to surface things that don't look right. Human beings think they're very good at pattern recognition. They're actually not very good at it at all. However, algorithms are very good at pattern recognition. Maybe they see that one of your users logs into your network sometime from 9 to 5 on a weekday in the US. And then it sees the same user credentials logging in from a terminal in a different country in the middle of the night. That doesn't fit the pattern. How about someone who is normally accessing files in a system that suddenly tries to access files all over the system that they have no privilege to, but in a very methodical manner, trying directory after directory in a list? That doesn't look right. So in that case, a SIEM will detect that, and it will tell you. It will send an alert to your Security Operations Center, the SOC, to let you know that something is going on that shouldn't be going on. And that's about it. It leaves it up to you to decide how to deal with a threat. Well, when you think back when SIEMs were first developed, that was exactly what we wanted. We wanted to know something was going on, and then we wanted to deal with it. Anyone who's ever dealt with a monitoring system that's alert-based knows what happens next. Alert fatigue. If you trigger alerts on a number of things, you're going to get a number of alerts. You can create a veritable storm of alerts. Even if you try to pare them back and only send the important things, what's not to say that a benign incident at the beginning doesn't become a huge problem later on for your team? Well, that's a difficult choice to make. But also, if you fatigue your SOC team with a huge number of alerts, eventually they're just going to start tuning them out. Oh yeah, we always see that. That's not a problem. Well, if they've been persisting in your network for 8, 9, 10 months, that not really a problem 7 months ago is the difference between you ejecting a bad actor and being the subject of a story on a cybersecurity news site. So SIEMs are really, really good at getting the data and figuring out what's going on. But how do you do something about it if you don't want your security team doing all the heavy lifting? Well, that's where a SOAR comes into play. SOAR stands for Security Orchestration and Automated Response. Now, SOARs have very similar tool sets to what a SIEM would, but not in the same depth. So think about it like this. A SIEM is really good at collecting the data and telling you something's going on. A SOAR has a similar tool set to a SIEM. However, it's not an identical match, because whereas a SIEM is designed to collect the data and then tell you that something's wrong, a SOAR is designed to be told that something is wrong and then do something about it. It's right there in the name, orchestration and automated response. So what happens is a SOAR is being told, or potentially detects, that there is an issue going on the network. Maybe it's a login from a foreign country that you want to block. Perhaps it is a threat actor that is attempting to recon your network and provide footprints for IP address scanning or directory enumeration. And then it does something. Well, what does it do? That all depends on the playbook. And if you're an automation person who's worked with any one of a number of automation platforms in the past, you know exactly what a playbook is. It is a list of instructions that tells the system what to do when it sees a particular input. Is someone attempting to enumerate directories? All right, use the playbook to revoke their access. Someone attempting to log in from a foreign country? Use the playbook to block that login attempt. These playbooks are triggered based on specific inputs, and they can be very complex. Maybe the playbook blocks the access, logs all attempts, sends an alert, and then also reconfigures permissions on certain areas in order to prevent them from attempting to get in through a different location. Those can all be triggered by specific playbooks. That sounds complicated. You're not far off from the actual point. What's going on is that there is a team that must kind of feed the SOAR with playbooks. If there's a new threat that's been detected, or if there's a new privilege escalation exploit that has to happen, if you want your SOAR to automatically block those things, you need to create a playbook for it to happen. So on the one hand, we cut down on alert fatigue because we don't need to spend nearly as much time responding to some of the quote-unquote basic alerts, because the SOAR will do it for us. However, we have to constantly tune the playbooks and make sure they're still responding in the proper manner. We have to make sure that we're on top of new threats so that we can create playbooks to respond to them, so that our SOC teams aren't sitting there scratching their head wondering what's going on. SIEMs and SOARs complement each other. A SIEM is a very deep platform that is designed to analyze data and provide information. SOARs take information and act on it. Okay. That sounds pretty simple, right? Everything that I've just described to you is being used in large organizations today, but it's an organizational level system. SIEMs and SOARs have their own teams that effectively spend all of their time taking care of them. So where does XDR fit into all of this? Because if you've been working in InfoSec for the last, several months, you've no doubt heard XDR, Extended Detection and Response. Well, in order to understand XDR, you have to understand what it extends. And that's EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response. Not familiar with that term? You might be familiar with its grandfather, antivirus. Yeah, that's right. We're going way old school on this one, back to the early 2000s. And I can't believe I just said that. Antivirus is the original thing on your system that looks for malicious software programs and attempts to stop them from doing things. Like, popping up I love you, or mail bombing people in your macro list. Good old-fashioned fun stuff. However, when's the last time you actually removed a virus from a system? It's been a while for me too. Most of the time we're dealing with threats like malware, or privilege escalation issues, or phishing campaigns. EDR was developed to augment what antivirus is already doing by providing ability to respond to those threats instead of just detecting them and telling a central console, hey, somebody's got CLES on their machine. EDR became XDR when it became very apparent that we didn't need to worry about just the endpoint. XDR takes in a wider scope. It looks at the endpoint, it looks at the servers, it looks at the network, it looks at the cloud, the applications, everything. Why? Well, we're not just a desktop anymore. We're not just a mobile device. We are a collection of applications running on a network, accessing data through the cloud. And a hole in any of those places could potentially compromise your security posture. Think about something like a phishing attempt. What's at fault? Is it the email? Is it the system that allowed it through? Is it the user for clicking on the phishing email? Is it the login attempt that provides the credentials? Is it the fact that it could drop a remote access Trojan on the system that allows the attacker to get a reverse connection? There's a lot of shoulder shrugging now, I'm sure. And the answer is that all of those things are important, and one specific system isn't going to tell you how to fix that. XDR has been developed after SIEMs and SOARs, and it's very much focused on the edge of your network, the endpoints. So it's got pluses, right? Well, yeah, it's super fast. Think about it like this. SOAR was developed at an organizational level to use playbooks to prevent large-scale things. XDR is designed to nip it in the bud, so to speak, to cut it off before it becomes a problem, to provide automated responses to these kinds of issues. Okay, that makes pretty good sense so far, right? We want to get in, we want to see it when it happens, and we want to stop it. And when you think about all of the tools that have been used over the years in security, more than any other discipline in IT, it is very much tool-focused and always has been. And every one of those tools is made by a different company or supported by a different group. You think the silos are bad now. Those tools create all kinds of silos. XDR says we're not going to worry about that. We're going to put it all under one umbrella, and we are going to give you the purported single pane of glass to look at everything and make decisions on it. Okay, that sounds great. And it sounds very similar to what a SOAR can do, just more at a tactical level instead of a strategic level. So what are the downsides? Well, the fact that XDR is provided to you by one company means that you are using one company's tools to do that. If you're one of those shops that loved the idea of using best-of-breed security on your endpoints, you don't get that with XDR. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it is the worst thing ever. I'm just saying that if you had a very specific mix of tools that you like to use, even if they were difficult to manage, you're not going to be able to see that with XDR because XDR's phishing filter is the one that's built in. The other thing is that those actions are enabled by third-party modules. So if I wanted to be able to interface with certain tools, I have to enable that module or that plugin in the XDR system. Now, in a SOAR module, I can create a playbook that does all of that stuff, but I have to spend time writing that playbook. But I can customize it a lot. Whereas with XDR, I go out to a marketplace, for example, or to a app store, if you will, and I get the plugin for a particular application or a particular cloud service. And I can do whatever the module creator says that I can do. Some of them will have a lot, some of them won't have much at all. But I'm limited by what's there. The other thing that tends to cause pause with people is the fact that they're being provided by a single source vendor, as I mentioned earlier. That can create lock-in issues. How many of you out there have a security policy that says that this section of the network will use one type of firewall and this section of the network will use a different one? Not because the performance is any different, but because we don't want any one compromise in an operating system to be able to be carried across the entire organization. I know many organizations that say that if the network is built by this vendor, the firewalls cannot be built by that vendor too. So you run into single source problems. All right, so we've defined SIEM, SOAR, XDR. So what do you use? Someone's knocking on your door right now telling you that you need to install one of these things. What should you do? Well, the answer, according to my friend Sam Clemens, is always it depends, which is the most common answer in IT. But what it depends on is what you're trying to accomplish. For organizations that are mid to starting to enter that upper tier, you want to use XDR. Yes, you're going to give up a lot of flexibility to use XDR, but you're also going to get it all in one package. And there are a lot of other companies out there that are trying to push XDR lower into the stack. One of the ones that I've talked about frequently is a company called XDR. And they are taking a software approach to creating XDR that's consumable by smaller organizations. Because when you think about XDR, especially with the amount of hardware that it takes to deploy it, it's a very large enterprise type solution. But the largest enterprises may not want to use XDR in isolation. They're going to deploy SIEMs and SOARs if they haven't already. All of these systems can work in concert. And no doubt you've heard in InfoSec how important defense in depth is. The depth is provided by the tool set. XDR can be enabled on your endpoints and your edges to detect and mitigate threats before they can get into the core of your enterprise. The crown jewels is the term that constantly gets used. But a SIEM can correlate across a number of devices, across a number of services, and detect ongoing patterns that could potentially be problematic, but maybe escape the detection threshold for XDR. And then that can be fed either to the XDR system or to a SOAR, and you can take action against it. And if you need more complicated actions than just stop the bad guys, you definitely do need to have a SOAR. But if you're going to deploy a SIEM and a SOAR and XDR, you're looking at 3 dedicated teams to take care of each of those. So if you don't have the head count, you need to look at what you can do the most good with at the time you have. Ask any organization out there that is using any of these tools. They're critical to the security posture of your organization, but they require care and feeding just like any other application or platform. Hopefully this gave you a look at some of the ways that you can detect and respond to threats, and it demystified some of the acronyms. So the next time that you feel that things are getting out of hand, you just want to go soaring off the edge of your desk and hide in a SIEM somewhere, you don't have to. Thank you very much for tuning in this month. I really appreciated the opportunity to kind of cover some of these things. In fact, these are technologies that I had no idea about several months ago, and I had to do a lot of research to understand why things keep leapfrogging over themselves. Because as we know, technology always marches on, and we really can't stop it. We can understand it, we can deploy it, and we can make sure that it does exactly what it's supposed to. I hope that you'll join me for another Tomversations episode coming up next month. In the meantime, please make sure you check out our website at gestaltit.com, where we have a number of great articles covering a variety of technologies, whether it's security or networking or storage or cloud. These are the things that you as enterprise IT professionals want to know about. The technologies that we build on, the issues that we face, and honestly, a little bit of what the future might hold for us. All of it can be found on our website. We'll be back next month with another episode of Tomversations. I hope to see you then.